Hello, everyone. This is the CINC Community Office Hours webinar about pond management and accountability. My name is Kayla Priest, and I will be the host of today's webinar. I'm also joined by Mike Davis. We are both on the CINC Live events team, and you can find more information about training and the recording of this webinar and others at cincommunity.com. So let's first dive into what a pond account even is, why we thought that this would be a good topic for today's webinar, because there may be people listening, joining us live or watching this later that are already using the pond, but I'm sure we also have some people that are not, and they're maybe curious about how the pond account can help them. And in fact, I'm interested to see that in the chat. Can you throw me a yes in the chat if you're with us live and you are currently using a pond account on your site, and a no if you're not? And that'll kind of help us gauge how deep we need to go into exactly what it is. Let's see, Victor pretty much only use the pond. Ginger, no. Keep bringing those responses in so we can get an accurate look at who is using what process. So while those answers continue to come in, because I see some other people here that aren't giving us an answer, let's just dive into what the pond is. So as you know, in your CINC account or in your CINC website, you have agent accounts. So let's say I work on a team with Mike. And so when I opened my site, I created an agent account for myself and for Mike. Maybe I have a couple other agents that come on several months down the line. I create agent accounts for them as well. So that means they have a way to log in. They have a dashboard where they manage their own business, and those are agent accounts. So a pond account is set up pretty similarly, and that it's set up the same way that you would add a new agent to the site. The difference here is Mike and I, if we're working on a team and we're agents on the site, we can only see the leads that are assigned to us. The pond account, however, works a little differently, where after we create it and assign leads to it, we then give agents access to see the leads in that pond, I should say. So in other words, when Mike and I log in, we would not only see the leads that have been assigned to us, but also leads that have been assigned to the pond. And the name is the pond, because as agents now we can go fishing for leads that are in that pond account in the hopes of making a connection and having that lead assigned to us and continue to work them. Mike, is there anything I have missed in that kind of basic overview of what a pond account even is?
I don't think so. That's the good basics of what the pond is and how it's worked. So the setup, the building it out in the platform, and the basic functionality of the pond is exactly as you described. Where it gets a little more complicated is how everyone wants to implement this, because it does vary team to team.
Absolutely. So I see Shelly put in that she is the pond. That's awesome. So you have a bunch of leads assigned to you, but maybe you have other team members having access to that. Maybe you're a team of one and you go fishing in your platform all the time. That's awesome. So like Mike said, where we get into the nuance is how we decide who gets access to the pond. What are the rules around the pond? And as Mike said, there are different ways to even put leads in the pond. So what we're going to hopefully do today is kind of demystify that and really talk about the way that we see teams having the most success. If we tried to get down in the nitty-gritty of every single possible way to implement and run the pond, we would be here for hours. And I know that no one has hours to sit and talk pond with us. So I'm going to be talking about the best way to manage the pond today. And that means the way that we have seen our agents having the most success. So first, I want to talk about an issue that I see that happens a lot when a broker or a site owner wants to implement the pond. So they maybe, let's say, go to CINC University. The site owner goes to CINC University and they hear about the pond, because we do talk about it on the first day there, and they think, yes, this is exactly what I need for my team. I'm going to go home and implement it. And they go home and maybe that night they create a pond account, and then they go into the office the next morning and they say, okay, everybody, we're going to be using a pond account. Here's how it works. Good luck. And then they say, I'll check in on them, you know, or maybe they even do one-on-ones and they say, how's it going with the pond? But they're getting a lot of questions, and maybe they're having to come up with the answers on the fly because it's something that they hadn't previously thought of. And there's a lot of confusion around, how do I manage this? What's the pond do? Why are we doing this at all? So I want to help you not run into that if you are trying to implement the pond already or you're thinking about it. Before you even announce it to your team, there are some things that you need to figure out and you need to have clear in your head before you announce it to your agents. And the first is going to be why you're even doing this at all. And if you have been to CINC, if you have been on any of our other webinars, especially for scripting, you know we're all about why questions and how they help you get real clarity. And implementing the pond is no different. So some questions that you want to ask yourself and know before you take this new feature to your team is to know why you're going to do it. And so it's important to know this so you can tell your agents and get them on board. And it really helps to write everything down. So if you wanted to start a new piece of paper, I like to handwrite, but you can even type it. And you maybe even want to say, why are we using the pond? And here are some highlights. And Mike, I'll ask you to kind of jump in if I forget anything here. So the big difference between all the leads being round robin and assigned out to all the agents on the team one by one is agents can very easily get overwhelmed. So again, let's say Mike and I work on a site together and we're getting round robin every lead that comes in. So I get one, then Mike gets one, then I get one, then maybe Mike gets two, then I get two. So at the end of the month, we have gotten a lot of new leads. Depending on how good we are with our time blocking for prospecting and for following up, it's really easy to fall behind. And even if you can stay up to date and make all the phone calls and do all the follow-up and manage all the automations, it's very easy by the end of the month to not know who you're currently working with, to not know exactly what you need to do, and to be a little lost because you were just overwhelmed in potential. You've got people who are interacting with you, people who aren't, and it can be hard to really know with, extreme clarity, here's my next, say 10 paychecks. Here's where I really need to focus, and then know where to use the rest of your time wisely. So with the pond, it helps agents create clarity in their business by having them only be assigned personally to the leads that they are very closely working with. And then having everyone else who's like 6 months or further down the line in the pond. So when they have time, they go and they prospect in the pond and they find potential new business. They maybe make a connection with someone in the pond and say, they're not going to be one of my next 10 to 15 paychecks. We had a great conversation, but I'm not ready to commit to them and have them be assigned to me personally. So they stay in the pond. So we'll get deeper into that later, but that's the first big why. It helps agents create real clarity over who they're currently working with, who is their strongest prospect, who is going to be one of those next 10 to 15 paychecks, and not worrying so much about all the rest. Second, it gives you the ability to hold your agents a little bit more accountable because they have to actually say, if Mike was my sign owner, I'd actually have to say, hey, Mike, I spoke to this lead earlier. We had a great conversation. I really want to work with them. Here's what they're looking for. Here's where, when they're looking to move, and here's why they're looking to move. I know all that. We had a great conversation. Will you assign them over to me? So I'm not saying that because I want to say it gives you the ability to micromanage, but it does give you the ability to have a little bit more coverage, some more eyeballs on exactly what's going on in the platform. Instead of logging in and seeing that an agent has 500 leads assigned to them and not really knowing what's up or down in there, it's seeing that they have their 15 next paychecks assigned to them and they're wanting to move one more in. And are they going to be able to effectively manage all those leads that are assigned to them? So when I'm talking about the whys, I'm talking about the benefits of the pond. The benefit is more clarity for agents on what they're able to do, and more clarity for you on who's moving around in your platform and why. So Mike, would you say there are any other benefits that we should talk about here about using the pond?
I mean, if you want to put like hard stats to a why behind using the pond.
Yes, we love numbers because that's going to really help get our team on board too, and we can share the data with them.
Absolutely. So the last stat that we pulled on our pond accounts or sites that have ponds is we noticed that it was around 16% higher appointment set ratio on sites that utilize the pond because of what Kayla just went through, because you're clarifying the who, what, when, and why of my prospect time. And you're also able to hold your agents more accountable to those metrics by having it in that one location of the pond. Everything worked in one location and simplifying that process for them. And then they're focusing their time on the right leads. They know their follow-up or with leads that are assigned to them that they specifically have some kind of touch point with, that they're carrying that conversation forward, or they're doing the showing, or their appointments that are under contract. And then everyone else, they know they have their 1 to 2 hours a day that they're doing their prospecting time out of the pond. So it really clears that up. And then that hard stat of, about 16% higher appointment set ratio out of teams that utilize the pond versus those that don't.
Awesome. Yeah, very good. When you are present, because we're still at the point now in our process where we haven't announced this to the team. So any stats that you have like that is going to strengthen when you go to the team and announce this new process. So once we have our why in place, why are we even doing this? Understand it and be able to share that with your team. We're not quite ready to share with them yet because there are some other things that we need to figure out first. Because again, in my example from earlier, when brokers or site owners want to go in and change something, they don't get the buy-in of their team, and that's why a lot of adoption or implementation of new features fail, because we just didn't have everyone bought in yet. And you want to know all the details first so they can tell that this is something that you have put the time in, and it's not just some whim that you guys are going to try for a few months and then discard it because it didn't work. So the more we know up front, the stronger this kind of proposition is to them. So our next step, after we're able to explain why we want to implement this feature, the pond account, is now we want to figure out what's the CINC process that goes along with it. So like I mentioned earlier, a part of the process is once the agent has a good conversation with the lead, reaching out to the operations manager, the team leader, the ISA, the broker, whoever you decide to have them kind of get approval to move the lead from the pond to the agent's personal dashboard. So that's when I'm talking about what's the CINC process. We need to have every step kind of ironed out so they know exactly what's expected of them. So the CINC process could be, once you make contact with the lead in the pond, you have to have a note, and it has to have the 3 W's, right? What they're looking for, when they're looking to move, and why they're looking to move, their motivation. So that would be step 1 in your CINC process. The second step in your CINC process could be the lead needs to have a reminder on them or a label explaining why there's not a reminder to follow up. The third step in your CINC process could be they need to adjust the saved search to accurately reflect what you were able to learn about the lead on the call. So this process should be pretty similar from team to team because those are our best practices. And so if you need to get the best practices straight and know exactly what you should be expecting of your agents, a really great webinar to either join live or watch is one that Mike and I do bi-weekly on Tuesdays. It is called Who Do I Call Today? And it is really that CINC process of breaking down who do we prospect on, who do we follow up on, and what are the steps in between. So when I make contact with someone, what do I do next? That you really need to have down to a very clear step-by-step process so the agents understand that going forward, in order to have a new lead assigned to you, these are the steps that you have to show us that you have done before we'll allow that to happen. And I'm not saying that every single time an agent gets a new lead on the phone, they have to immediately move them over to their dashboard. Because one of the really cool things that we've seen brokers and site owners have great success with is, and you've heard me kind of tease at it a couple times already, is who in this platform are this agent's next 10 to 15 paychecks, meaning their next 10 to 15 closings. And those are the people that I really want to have assigned to me so I can, really with, again, extreme clarity, work those leads and then prospect in the pond for anyone else. I may see someone in the pond that is going to close in the next 3 months, and they're going to be, my next fifth paycheck, and I want to move them in. So you need to decide, are you going to put a cap on how many leads the agent is allowed to have assigned to them? For a lot of people, it can be, for new agents, 10. For an experienced agent, it could be 30 or 50. But you have to really stay on top of it to know, do they have the right amount of leads assigned to them? If they want to move a new lead in because they are going to be in their next few closings, do they need to move another one out? And you know that by knowing their stats, knowing the benchmarks that you expect of them, and seeing how they're doing with those. So Mike, I would love for us to talk really quickly about some of those stats that we see our brokers, site owners tracking that help us know when our agents are being successful. So call volume, appointment set. Talk to us a little bit about how you can manage those stats for your team and how you can come up with the numbers that the benchmark should be, and not just saying, oh, you need to make 100 dials a week, but actually having a thought process behind it.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things to do when you're going into this, and it kind of leads into the second half of this, is understanding your agent's goals, because you can have all the goals that you want for a team, and it's great to have your goals or your agent's goals align with your team or your brokerage's goals. But it's very important to understand what theirs are, because it's going to help drive that motivation, help drive that work ethic that they're going to get out of them. As far as what you're able to do in the dashboard, the database, after you kind of figure out what those goals are for them, you can work through and figure out, kind of reverse engineer what they need to do. So look at what that end goal is. If my end goal is, I want to close 15 homes this year because last year I closed 10, I want to outperform. So we can kind of look at, okay, last year you closed 10 deals, you were making 100 dials a week. Let's go up to 150 or 200 a week and see if we can't get you that extra little bit. You can start tracking things such as if they're making a lot of dials and they're getting a lot of contacts, but there are no appointments being set. That's now a conversation. That link is broken in the conversation they're having on the phone. If they're setting a lot of appointments, but they're not closing a lot of deals, something is going on in that either buyer or a listing appointment. So you can start to leverage those kind of metrics of the pipeline, their call volume, their text and email volume, and their response time off of the broker launchpad, and start to kind of find where those broken links are with your agents. And then use those goals to meet those metrics and kind of marry the two together for successful one-on-ones and accountability.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Mike, about reverse engineering. And I love kind of looking at, okay, in his example, I closed 10 last year. I want to, do 50% more this year. So I'm going to close 15. I'm a newer agent, and I'm looking to increase my goal to close 15 homes. We can reverse engineer, as he mentioned, to say, well, to actually get to a closing, I need to be doing this many showings. So in other words, we have to be tracking, always be tracking, where when I actually meet with someone for, a consultation, how often does that lead to showings? Or for listings, how often does it lead to me signing the listing? And then to even get someone to meet with me, how many appointments did I have to set? So in other words, what's my show rate on my appointments? For every 5 appointments, do I set to 3 people actually show up? So you can work backwards from your goal to say, okay, if I want to sell 15, I need to be constantly showing this many people. To be able to get people to the showing, I need to be scheduling appointments with this many people. To actually meet with that many people, I need to be setting how many appointments. And then finally, the biggest one of all, to be able to set that many appointments, how many phone calls do I have to make? And so it may not be the same number for every agent, but there should be an underlying benchmark for everyone on the team where it's everyone is making at least 150 dials a week. And then you can tweak from there based on, like Mike said, those individual agents' goals. And so we have really seen when when brokers, site owners take a real interest in helping the individual agent reach their personal goals, we have a lot more success because we're no longer forcing an agent into a situation where they're working for a goal that's not personal to them. And instead they're working towards something where they have some skin in the game. And so not everyone wants to make 6 figures a year. Not everyone wants to be a millionaire. If you have a team, an agent on your team that's happy making, 80 grand, and to do that, they need to sell, X amount of houses, let them do that. As long as they are being productive on your team and contributing to your bottom line and the culture of your company, let them have that smaller goal. If you do have someone that wants to be a millionaire, how do you help them get there? What do they need to do in between to get there? If you have someone who worked a backbreaking job for years and all they want is more freedom to be with their family, then how do you help them craft that life that they're looking for? And that's when you really get the buy-in of your team, when you know them deeply, personally, and you're able to help them reach those goals and not hold them to the goal that you think is more appropriate for them.
And Kayla, we do have a question from Victor. He asked if we can unmute him and let him ask his question. I'm going to go ahead and pop him off while we have a good point to ask those. Victor, I just asked you to unmute so you can hop in.
Can you guys hear me?
So I just called the listing agent for your place.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. Sorry, my friend's doing some calls in the background. So, 1 second here. I'm gonna.
Around 3 interested parties who are planning to.
Got a busy office today.
So our lead pools are a little bit different. So for example, we have a pool of about 10,000, maybe 30,000 people right now. So all of us use our ponds pretty much as our main source. So what I've noticed on my side here is we've run out of fresh leads. So the first maybe 400 people have already been hit so hard. We have 14 members on our team that are hitting the leads on a daily basis. So I'm like 4,000 pages in or something like that, calling people who signed up maybe 1.5 to 2 years ago. So maybe when it comes to management of leads and the approach and the systems used here to manage these types of people, right? Because you're not having these warm conversations and you're adding people sometimes to have on an email list, right? So I'll add people to my personal folder just so I can send them emails potentially to get a reply. Even that lately, it's kind of felt like I'm hitting my head against the wall lately, right? It really is a huge numbers game. We're prospecting here 5 to 6 hours a day, 200, 300 calls a day type of thing. I've been doing it for about 2 to 3 months. Sometimes it is a little disappointing, right? So maybe you can give some insight on how you can approach that, how you can kind of maximize the potential, what's kind of optimal in these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question too. So it sounds like you guys already have a huge database, but there's my brain went a couple different directions, and I'm sure Mike's did as well. So we'll both kind of tackle this, but I immediately am thinking it may be that you're not generating the right number of leads for the number of agents that you have. And so we see teams being really successful, and they can generate anywhere between 50 to 100 new leads per month per agent. So if you did have 14 agents and you wanted to generate 100 leads per month, take that, 100 leads per agent per month, then you would need to take that number and talk to your CINC account manager who can work with your client marketing manager. So basically they're the people who manage all of the ad spend and ad campaigns for you. They can optimize it to make sure you're getting people in the right part of town for your agents to work, and maximizing your budget to get you the most leads possible. So we're always going for the highest quality lead at the lowest price. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, right? Where there's some different seasonality kind of things that can come into play. So I would first make sure that you're generating the right number for the number of agents that you have, and let your account manager and your PPC manager really take a good hard look at the campaigns and make sure that it's working for you. Mike, where's another direction your brain went?
Yeah, so my brain went two ways. The first, the way that you would phrase the question, Victor, it sounds like when you're hitting through your prospects, you're kind of calling that list in the same order every day, and you're having to dive deeper and deeper into the list to get there. There are a couple options to sort that data differently. If you look at the column headers on your leads dashboard, you can filter by last touch, least recent. So you're looking at the people that you've called least recently. It's been the longest amount of time since you made that dial. So you're pulling up those older leads that haven't been contacted to the top. You can also leverage last login. So you're basing on the last login count, but that last touch, least recent, at least pulls those older leads up to the top that you haven't made an outbound dial on recently. My other thought process does kind of plug an add-on feature that we offer, which is AI. It's our artificial intelligence. And that can work off behavioral messaging. So a lot of those older leads in your pond are performing behaviors that it tracks in the platform, but you don't necessarily get an advantage to take action on because there's so much going on in your platform. So if you add features like AI and let it work your active leads through those behavioral messaging, it is drumming up a lot of that kind of like older leads, kind of pulling those up to the top for you. So it identifies who to call and really calling those out in the right way. So there's kind of a free option there to change how you're dialing that list. There's kind of that paid option there. And then some other opportunities are leveraging the lead engagement filter, looking at the leads before they go unengaged. I think it tracks lead engagement. It's like engaged is like 55 days or more they've engaged with the platform. And it's like 55 to 115 and 115 and older. You can try to use that lead engagement filter to catch people before they go unengaged. Send them an email, get them to trigger one of those behavioral messages and open that line of communication via text.
Yeah, and I see, Mike, those are really great points. I see Victor said in the chat that he does use last login. And so if you use that over and over again, it definitely can, like Mike said, end up being that you're calling in the same order. So I would definitely alternate and start using that last touch, least recent, or last call, least recent, either one of those. That will really help you just change the order. And so I'll put in one more suggestion before we move on. I have seen recently that there are some teams that are successfully running two ponds, one for newer leads and one for older leads. And so older leads could be considered anyone over like 120 days old. It could be different for you, but that's just what I've seen in conversation at training and in our CINC owners Facebook group. And giving newer agents access first to just the older pond, because sometimes those older leads are going to be ready to move a little bit sooner because they are just further along in the pipeline, further along in their time frame. And then as they get some closings under their belt, as they get more successful, or for your already established agents, giving them access to both new and old. And so that way you are kind of cutting the database size down a little bit. So it's not so daunting that you've got, 30,000 leads and you're just like, I'm never going to be able to make a dent in this. And then it also gives your agents a little bit more laser focus of, what their job is, converting this new lead versus converting the old lead. I would also make sure that your scripting is on point. So when you do make a connection, you can have that great conversation. And you mentioned that you're trying to send them emails and you're kind of hitting a wall. That's because email across the board engagement is down. And that's not a CINC statistic. That's just a life statistic where people's inboxes are so full and so busy that it's harder to make an impact in someone's inbox than it used to be. So don't spend so much time on your emails. Use automations. Plug for our bi-weekly Thursday webinars that'll be next week. Mike leads a great webinar on our auto tracks feature and behavioral messaging. And so when you use more automations for our texting and emailing, it frees up more time for you to do more of your money-making activities, which are making your dials and setting those appointments. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully we broke it down in small enough pieces, but I would first make sure that your ad campaigns are optimized. Talk to your account manager about that. Make sure you're generating the right amount of leads. Make sure that you are sorting by last touch and last call, least recent when you are making your dials. You can also use CINC AI, which is an amazing way to float some people up to the top who are a little bit more engaged, probably a little bit ready to go. We have some great webinars that I'm getting up on the webinars page today, the recordings of them where we spoke to CINC clients who are successfully using AI. So it would be a great listen if that's something that you're wanting to get into. Using the lead engagement filter to help, again, ping some people to get some logins to the site, which will then trigger behavioral messages, which will then trigger AI. So you'll have lots of levels of automation there, and it's working for you in the background. And then also just make sure that your scripting is on point. But yeah, I just wanted to recap in case we threw so much at you. But that was a great question. Thank you so much. So once you do have your why down, your goals and your benchmarks down, so you are going to be able to tell your agents that this is kind of the process, right? Here's the process for working leads. We're all going to be making at least, 100 dials a week. That would be 400 a month. When you have that very basic process down, we also need to know consequences for not meeting those goals, for not meeting those benchmarks, but also rewards for the people who are doing, the most work, putting in the most effort, and also having the most results. This is when I think it's a great time to actually start to involve your team. So at this point, once I have the process down, the why down, and I have some of those basic benchmarks down, I'm going to the team, I'm calling a meeting, whether it's a one-off meeting or a standing kind of weekly meeting that you have with everyone, and I'm telling them the process. I'm saying, I went to CINC University, or I attended this great webinar with Mike and Kayla, and I found out about this really cool feature that we need to use. Or I know that we implemented the pond before, but I've learned a lot more since, and I want to refocus us in working in the pond. And I want to share all this information with you. So we're not giving them the option to do this, but we are making them feel involved. So we're not going to say, I want us to do the pond. What do you guys think? It is, we're doing the pond. Here's the reason why. Here's all the information that we're going to need, and getting them involved. So it could be that in your first meeting, you tell them the why, the benefit behind it. And you give them a written piece of paper that has more, more information on it. Give them time to absorb what's going on, and then say, the next time we meet, I want you to have read over all this information and really understand it, but come with your questions, and we're going to actually figure out together the consequences and the rewards for when you don't hit these benchmarks, for when you don't follow the process. Let them have a hand in deciding what happens if they do not meet the benchmarks, and let them have a hand in deciding what happens when they do meet or exceed the benchmarks. And again, that's going to vary from agent to agent, but we do have those team level, everyone's at least doing this. right? When we let people have a hand in deciding, it gets automatically more buy-in. It lets them feel like they had a hand and being a part of the change instead of feeling rocked by the change and not understanding why we're doing it and why are you making me do this when I didn't even want to do this. So when we get their involvement, we do get more of that buy-in. So if you are curious about kind of diving more into this, Mike, if you could put this URL in the chat for me, I want you to go to cinccommunity.com/resources. So the word resources, cinccommunity.com/resources. And that is where you can find some additional information that I have put together in the past about the pond. You'll be able to watch a webinar that I did with 2 CINC owners talking about the way they run the pond, as well as some additional information I've put together to help you figure out your process, give you a sneak peek at what your process should look like, and also giving you some ideas on consequences and some rewards. The final part of all of this, when you have all of this together, is writing it all down, A to Z, everything we've talked about, and having your agent sign off on it. Getting their buy-in also means that they have agreed to hold themselves to these standards and agreed that you will be holding them to those standards. So you have to get their signature on all of this, saying that they understand what happens if they do not meet the benchmarks, if they do not involve themselves in this feature, this process. And eventually it could be that after, several instances of them not meeting weekly goals, not doing what they said they agreed to do, then maybe it's turning off the lead flow for them and not allowing them to get new leads out of the pond. Maybe they can still work the pond, but they're kind of just nurturing people. Maybe you turn off their access to the pond. Maybe you don't allow them to get new leads until they prove that they actually know the process, they know the system, and they do it. So there is more information on that at that cinccommunity.com/resources site that I just had Mike share in the chat, cinccommunity.com/resources. So now we have to kind of switch gears and talk about inspecting what we expect. And so this is where we'll end for today, is talking about in-depth one-on-ones with your team. Mike, tell me, if you will, I'm going to put you on the spot, the benefit of holding a weekly one-on-one with each of your agents.
It removes the unknowns, and a lot of job and work-related stress comes from unknowns. Am I performing well enough? Am I meeting the metrics I need to meet? Are there things that I'm not doing that need to happen? Are there expectations being met? There's all these different things that, especially somebody like myself who's going to sit there and stew on all the unknowns of like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm doing good. No one's told me I'm doing bad. So I guess I'm doing good, but could I be better? Do I need to be better? All of that starts to spiral on someone. So having those one-on-ones removes the unknowns. It helps keep your team in line with their goals. They're not going to wake up, 7 months into the year and be like, wait, I'm not going to hit my goals this year because I don't know where I've been. You're helping keep them on track, meeting their goals, which keeps you on track to meet your goals as the team leader, that brokerage. Mm-hmm. It also keeps you connected with your team. So you're not going to wake up one day and everyone's just unhappy on your team and you have a mass exodus. It prevents a lot of different things there just by having that simple touch base.
Yeah, we call that on our team when we see that happen is you don't want your team to one day go to lunch without you. And then they come back and all of a sudden they're all gone. Mike has hit the nail on the head, having these one-on-ones, it's good for you and it's good for your agents. So we don't want to be doing our, kind of recap at the end of the year and seeing that our ROI was really low because there were opportunities missed that we just didn't see because we weren't, again, inspecting what we expect. And so we inspect the numbers of each of our agents. We inspect the dashboard and the database itself, and we track everything. We keep numbers. And so whether you're using an external kind of tracker, like Sisu is one I know that a lot of our bigger teams use. And there's also another one, I cannot remember the name, but if you're using one that helps keep track, what was that?
Like CTE?
Yeah, CTE, that's it. I think it's like something about excellence.
Yes, it's something to excellence or something like that, but it's CTE.
Yeah, but it's CTE, that's right.
Programs.
Those are the two big ones that I've heard that, our big teams use, and it helps you track your numbers. There is a lot of reporting in CINC that can help you, but let's talk about what exactly to talk about in our one-on-ones, because at an old position I had a team leader who would come to me in a one-on-one, and she would ask, what's going on in your personal life? Which was great that she was interested, but that's all we would talk about. We wouldn't talk about my work goals. We wouldn't talk about my work performance. And it was just kind of like a catch-up session. And that's an important part of a one-on-one, is kind of easing into the conversation of what's new with you. How are you feeling? How are things going? And having that soft conversation first of, what's new with you, because you do want to be checked in with each of your team members. But we do then have to take a look at the numbers. And how I think a really effective one-on-one works is to first reflect on the previous week and then plan for the following. So in other words, we're going to say, what were your goals last week? And they should bring their computer, and you should have yours, and you should each have their dashboards pulled up. And you're going to say, what were your goals last week? And they will say, maybe it was X amount of appointments, X amount of dials, again, whatever those benchmarks are for you. And then you're going to ask, how did you do? And we don't rely on people to self-report, because we've got either the CINC reports or one of those, again, external tracking systems like we talked about. And we're going to say, did you meet it? Did you not meet it? Did you exceed it? If they exceeded it, great. What were the outcomes of those calls, those appointments? If they met it, awesome. How can you exceed this next week? If they did not meet it, what happened? Why do you think that you did not meet this goal? And then asking a really important question, which is, how can I help you meet or exceed this goal this upcoming week? And let them tell you what they may need help with. And it's not, can I help you with anything? It's, what can I help you with this week? There's a real difference in asking, can I, versus what. What opens it up to them feeling okay with sharing with you what they're maybe struggling with. So once we know that, we can then take a look at, what's your goal for this upcoming week? Is it changing at all based on your circumstances, or is it staying the same? And what are you going to do to meet this goal or exceed this goal? And what can I do to help you in this next week again? Now, at this point, I also want you to open up the computers and again, look at their dashboard and have them take you through their next 10 paychecks, their next 15 paychecks, if they've got that many, and say, who are your next closings? Tell me about them. You may even say, tell me your top 5. And you need to be able to open that lead up and have them tell you everything about their situation, what they're looking for, when they're looking to move, and their motivation. Where are they in process? Are they out showing? Do they have a pending offer? They need to be able to tell you all the details about their next, probably I'd say more realistically in a one-on-one 3 to 5. Ask them for their next 3 to 5. If you've got the time, you can talk about more. Ask what you can help with to get those deals closed. Mike, what am I forgetting, or what would you like to add about one-on-ones? What to talk about?
I think you hit the big things. You're looking at the agent's business, kind of going over their leads that are assigned to them, especially if we're focusing on that pond format we discussed earlier. So going over their leads, the status of each, kind of making sure that they understand what's coming in the next 30 days for them. What does that look like as far as the leads that they're working? versus what's in the pipeline versus what's being nurtured through the pond. You know, looking for areas of improvement. You know, maybe you're seeing a lot of dials, but not a lot of notes being made. And those notes are super important to, you know, follow up down the road. So maybe that's a coachable moment there. So bring in those coachable moments and then end on the highlights. You know, if they've made improvements, definitely bring those in. You don't want to just, you want to also encourage them with what's going well. So bring in their opportunities, but then also bring in the areas that they're already shining at. And then look in and figure out where you guys can both meet in the middle to get them to their goals. Because again, getting your agents to their goals is what's going to get you to yours. Oftentimes we think it's just pedal to the metal, you know, gas all the way. But if we can take a step back and look at it as a people business, because buying homes is a people business. If we can focus on the people in our businesses, it's going to make them better at helping other people get into their homes on their side and building those relationships. And it's going to make your entire team better. So just focus on what's happening, what's good, what can be improved, and then what their goals are and kind of how we can help meet them there.
Now, one thing I have seen that helps site owners and team leaders keep great track of this is to have like a running Google Doc, where if it was Mike holding a one-on-one with me, he would have a Google Doc with my name at the top. And then we just enter down, have today's date, and then keep track of all the notes, sharing that with me so I have access to it. So I can see what the goals are. So I can see how close I am to my goals, but it's also a running tally. So then we can easily scroll back up and just see what we talked about last week and then move forward to the next one. So again, we just enter down today's date and we'd continue on with that conversation. So it's just a running list of everything you've discussed, all the goals, how close I am, what I'm working on. And it's also a place for you to keep track of all those kind of personal milestones that they're telling. Now, of course, if someone says like, you know, I'm really depressed, and you're not necessarily typing in there like Kayla's really depressed this week, but you know, it's what goals do we have around helping there, because since it is shared with the person, then you want, of course, you know, to keep things fresh and motivating for them. But it's really important to share that with them so they can know, you know, along the course, what am I working on? They have the history of all that as well. Now, it's not the only meeting that you need to be holding with your team, but I would say it's the most important one. It's the one where you get to know the agent on the personal level and where you get to keep track of all of the goals. And just like Mike hit the nail on the head when he said, you know, it's where you find those coachable opportunities and those coachable moments where you're not, you know, chastising someone, but you're saying, I'm noticing there's a link broken, you know, you're getting a lot of phone calls, but not setting many appointments. So I think the, you know, next best thing is for us to work on your scripting, and then maybe setting some additional time that week to do some role play with them or sign them up for the scripting webinar or send them to CINC. But you're able to have those opportunities to coach someone and nip bad behavior in the bud before it becomes a full-blown problem, before your ROI is down the drain and before they are not able to pay their bills next month. You know, it's catching those moments and giving you time to actually address them, because we should praise in public and chastise in private, because we don't need anyone feeling like they're not a true part of the team, and the one-on-one gives you the opportunity to do that. Yeah. Anything else, Mike?
No, I was just going to say, by including them kind of in the whole process, especially if you're shifting to a pond format and adding the one-on-ones into your business, kind of taking everything we talked about today, involving them in that process and really being a partner to them and not just a manager or the boss man at the top. You're building a rapport with your agents and your team that is going to be visible to other agents in the industry. You're going to become a differentiator. People are going to want to join your team because you're going to have more camaraderie. You're going to have better results. And so it's going to make you stand out amongst people that want to join your team. And then that is also going to translate into the work that they output into the field, talking to your leads and the clients that you're paying for. And so you'll see that kind of on the other side of that as well, kind of impacting the results you see in working leads. So not just the camaraderie, the morale, for your team, but also how they interact with their agents. So it's kind of top down, flow of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've thrown a lot out at you. So I'm curious, do you have any questions for us if you're still with us? Questions about situation that maybe you have with your pond, or you want to implement it and you have a question about that process. I'll leave that up for about 30 seconds to let you type a question in for us. In the meantime, I do want to plug one more time, cincommunity.com/resources. That is going to be your source for additional pond information, including I have 2 books that I have shared on there that I think are really great for any team lead or any team owner. The first is like a shorter, kind of almost like parable type book called Who Moved My Cheese? It is by Spencer Johnson, MD, and it is all about change management within your company. And it tells it through just like a fun story. And so it's a little bit of better, like kind of intro read if you're looking for some like quick how to implement changes in your team. And the second one's a little more scientific. So for my operations managers, especially someone who's really keyed in with accountability of their team and implementing big changes in a team, I have to read the name of this one or I'll get it wrong because it's long. It's The Science of Organizational Change, How Leaders Set Strategy, Change Behavior, and Create an Agile Culture. And that's by Paul Gibbons. And both of those, I've read them both because I'm a big believer in change management, and they're awesome resources. Whether you're looking to implement a pond or not. If you are running a team in any capacity, whether that's team leader, operations, team owner, I think it's really important to understand how you announce change to your team has everything to do with how successful the team becomes in implementing it. So it goes a lot more in depth than we even could today, but both great reads. And also cincommunity.com/resources has some additional slides and a webinar recording for you to watch that just dives even deeper into ponds than we had time for today. So it looks like we don't have any questions, but we do have a thank you from Ginger. Thank you for being here, Ginger. You're very welcome. Thank you to everyone else who joined in. We do have additional webinars and of course, recordings up at cincommunity.com/webinars. I hope you have a great rest of the week. And I hope that we will see you on some upcoming webinars or maybe even in person at CINC University soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for attending. We'll see you soon.
Bye.